I don't think he's looking for a Cold War with the United States. I don't think it's about as I said to him, I said, your generation and mine are about 10 years apart. This is not a kumbaya moment, as you used to say back in the 60s in the United States, like, let's hug and love each other. But it's clearly not in anybody's interest, your country's or mine, for us to be in a situation where we're in a new Cold War. And I truly believe he thinks that. He understands that. But that does not mean he's ready to, quote, figuratively speaking, lay down his arms and say, come on. He still, I believe, is concerned about being, quote, encircled. He still is concerned that we, in fact, are looking to take him down, et cetera. He still has those concerns. But I don't think they are the driving force as the kind of relationship he's looking for with the United States. Jennifer Jacobs.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. Is there a particular reason why the summit lasted only about 3 hours? We know you had maybe allotted 4 to 5 hours. Was there any reason it ran shorter? Also, President Putin said that there were no threats or scare tactics issued. Do you agree with that assessment, that there were no threats or scare tactics?
Yes.
And also, did you touch on Afghanistan and the safe withdrawal of troops?
Yes, and yes. Let me go back to the first part. The reason it didn't go longer is when the last time two heads of state have spent over 2 hours in direct conversation across the table, going into excruciating detail. You may know of time, I don't. I can't think of one. So we didn't need, as we got through, when we brought in the larger group, our defense, our intelligence, and our foreign, my foreign minister wasn't foreign minister, my Secretary of State was with me the whole time. Our ambassador, et cetera, we brought everybody in. We had covered so much. And so there was a summary done by him and by me of what we covered. Lavrov and Blinken talked about what we had covered. We raised things that required more amplification or made sure we didn't have any misunderstandings. And so it was kind of after 2 hours there, we looked at each other like, okay, what next? What is going to happen next is we're going to be able to look back, look ahead in 3 to 6 months and say, did the things we agreed to sit down and try to work out, did it work? Are we closer to a major strategic stability talks and progress? Are we further along in terms of and go down the line? That's going to be the test. I'm not sitting here saying because the president and I agreed that we would do these things, that all of a sudden it's going to work. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I think there's a genuine prospect to significantly improve the relations between our two countries without us giving up a single solitary thing based on principle and our values. No, there were no threats. There were, as a matter of fact, I heard he quoted my mom and quoted other people today. It was very, as we say, which will shock you coming from me, somewhat colloquial. And we talked about basic fundamental things. And you know how I am. I explain things based on personal basis. What happens if, for example? And so there were no threats, just simple assertions made and no, well, if you do that, then we'll do this, with anything I said. It was just letting him know where I stood, what I thought we could accomplish together, and what, in fact, if there were violations of American sovereignty, what we would do. No, he asked us about Afghanistan. He said that he hopes that we're able to maintain some peace and security, and I said that has a lot to do with you. He indicated that he was prepared to, quote, help on Afghanistan. I won't go into detail now, and help on Iran, and help on. And in return, we told him a lot what we wanted to do relative to bringing some stability and economic security or physical security to the people of Syria and Libya. So we had those discussions. Yamiche.
Thanks so much, Mr. President. Did you say that you didn't issue any threats? Were there any ultimatums made when it comes to ransomware? And how will you measure success, especially when it comes to these working groups on Russian meddling and on cybersecurity?
Well, it's going to be real easy. They either, for example, on cybersecurity, are we going to work out where they take action against the ransomware criminals on Russian territory? They didn't do it. I don't think they planned it in this case. And are they going to act? We'll find out. Will we commit? What can we commit to act in terms of anything affecting, violating international norms that negatively affects Russia? What are we going to agree to do? And so I think we have real opportunities to move. And I think that one of the things that I noticed when we had the larger meet is that people who are very, very well informed started thinking, you know, this could be a real problem. What happens if that ransomware outfit were sitting in Florida or Maine and took action, as I said, on their single lifeline to their economy, oil? It'd be devastating. And they're like, you can see them kind of go, oh, we do that, but like, whoa. So it's in everybody's interest that these things be acted on. We'll see, though, what happens from these groups we put together. The third one, yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, when President Putin was questioned today about human rights, he said the reason why he's cracking down on opposition leaders is because he doesn't want something like January 6th to happen in Russia. And he also said he doesn't want to see groups formed like Black Lives Matter. What's your response to that, please?
My response is kind of what I communicated. But I think that's a ridiculous comparison. It's one thing for literally criminals to break through cordon, go into the Capitol, kill a police officer, and be held unaccountable. And it is for people objecting and marching on the Capitol and saying, you are not allowing me to speak freely. You are not allowing me to do A, B, C, or D. And so they're very different criteria. Steve Holland, Reuters.
President Putin said he was satisfied with the answer about your comment about him being a killer. Could you give us your side on this? What did you tell him?
He's satisfied. Why would I bring it up again?
Talk to him. Do you believe you can trust him?
Look, this is not about trust. This is about self-interest and verification of self-interest. That's what it's about. So I virtually almost anyone that I would work out an agreement with that affected the American people's interest, I don't say, well, I trust you, no problem. Let's see what happens. You know, as that old expression goes, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We're going to know shortly. Igor, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty.
Hello, Mr. President. Hello, Mr.
You want to go in the shade? You can. Can you see?
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So I think you know attacks in civil society and the free press continue inside Russia.
Yes.
For example, Radio Free Europe.
Yes.
Radio Liberty, Voice of America, Quarantine TV channel where I work, branded foreign agents, and several other independent media. So we are essentially being forced out in Russia 30 years after President Yeltsin invited us in. My question is, after your talks with President Putin, how interested do you think he is in improving the media climate in Russia?
I wouldn't put it that way in terms of improving the climate. I would, in fact, put it in terms of how much interest does he have in burnishing Russia's reputation that is viewed as not being contrary to democratic principles and free speech. That's a judgment I cannot make. I don't know. But it's not because I think he's interested in changing the nature of a closed society or closed government's actions relative to what he thinks is the right of government to do what it does. It's a very different approach. You know, there's a couple of really good blogs. I told him I read a couple. I read most everything he's written and the speeches he's made, and I've read a couple of very good biographies, which many of you have as well. And I think I pointed out to him that Russia had an opportunity, that brief shining moment after Gorbachev and after things began to change drastically, to actually generate a democratic government. But what happened was it failed, and there was a great race among Russian intellectuals to determine what form of government would they choose and how would they choose it. And based on what I believe Mr. Putin decided was that Russia has always been a major international power when it's been totally united as a Russian state, not based on ideology, whether it was going back to Tsar and Commissars straight through to the revolution, the Russian Revolution, and to where they are today. And I think that it's clear to me, and I've said it, that I think he decided that the way for Russia to be able to sustain itself as a great, quote, great power is to, in fact, unite the Russian people on just the strength of the government. The government controls, not necessarily ideologically, but the government. And I think that's the choice that was made. I think I'm not going to second guess whether it could have been fundamentally different, but I do think it does not lend itself to Russia maintaining itself as one of the great powers in the world.
Did the military response ever come up in this conversation today? Did you, in terms of the red lines that you laid down, is military response an option for a ransomware attack? And President Putin had called you in his press conference an experienced person. You famously told him he didn't have a soul. Do you now have a deeper understanding of him after this meeting?
Thank you very much.
But on military response, sir?
No, we didn't talk about military response.
In his hearing, Mr. President, he's saying that there's no substitute for face-to-face dialogue, and also with what you said at NATO, that the biggest problems right now are Russia and China. You've spoken many times about how you've spent perhaps more time with President Xi than any other world leader. So is there going to become a time where you might call him old friend to old friend and ask him to open up China to the World Health Organization investigators who are trying to get to the bottom of COVID-19?
Let's get something straight. We know each other well. We're not old friends. It's just pure business.
So I guess my question would be, you've said that you were going to press China. You signed on to the G7 communique that said the G7 were calling on China to open up, to let the investigators in. But China basically says they don't want to be interfered with anymore. So what happens now?
The impact, the world's attitude toward China as it develops. China's trying very hard to project itself as a responsible and very, very forthcoming nation. That they are trying very hard to talk about how they're taking and helping the world in terms of COVID-19 and vaccines. They're trying very hard. Look, certain things you don't have to explain to the people of the world. They see the results. Is China really actually trying to get to the bottom of this? One thing we did discuss, as I told you, in the EU and the G7 and with NATO, what we should be doing, and what I'm going to make an effort to do, is rally the world to work on what is going to be the physical mechanism available to detect early on the next pandemic and have a mechanism by which we can respond to it and respond to it early. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And we need to do that. Thank
The President of the United States, an extraordinary scene. Welcome all of you on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio. For radio, I must paint the picture of 87 degrees, a high of 88 in a sweltering Geneva today, and a president with his coat off halfway through this press conference with the aviator glasses on hand and the binder as well, no doubt full of notes on Putin, and a gentleman reinvigorated. We must remember this is a president who in his first decade in the Senate was the leader on arms control. Still lecturing the press there. We're watching to see if we have any more headlines across Bloomberg. We will move on here on a day of Federal Reserve Open Market Committee. This will be in 7 minutes. Our Michael McKee watching carefully the comments from the Fed, and of course the important press conference coming.
All right, folks, good afternoon and welcome back. This is the Marketplace Show Reset and Jumpstart TV. I'm Anthony Weeks, executive producer of the Colorado Network and managing director for SETI. SETI is a macroeconomic and public policy think tank in the area of economic and business development. We come to you each and every week on our various platforms, television and radio. We broadcast live on WSDX Radio, and we broadcast on Tempo Network Television throughout the United States, the Caribbean, and in Guyana and Suriname in South America. I'm joined by my colleague, Terry Coxum, on this segment number 2 on business, economy, and public policy. Speaking of public policy, you just heard live coverage of President Joe Biden. He is attending the G7. That's the annual summit that takes place for the leaders of the countries of the G7. And he was reporting, he did his press conference from Geneva, but from what I understand, the venue for this year's summit was in the UK. I'm not 100% sure of that, but his press conference was in Geneva. So it's either or. Geneva or the UK is where the G7 met. And so it was important to bring you live coverage of the president's summit and visit with the G7, and to report to the American people as to the progress of that summit. Most important, there was discussion or meetings with Vladimir Putin, who is the president of Russia, and he was really just kind of sharing with the American people as to what what was discussed between the two leaders of their countries. And I believe that there is a meeting scheduled with President Xi of China. That's Beijing, China, not the People Republic of China, not the Republic of China. It gets a little bit confusing, but I have to draw that distinction because, obviously geopolitically in the Indo-Pacific region, you have the dynamics of two China. One is democratic and one is communist. And so therefore, the President Joe Biden is on the world stage all of this week and meeting with the leaders of the G7 countries. The United States is the largest economy as a superpower, military and economic superpower. We're the largest economy in the world, and China is the second. I'm not sure where Russia ranks, but Russia certainly is a force to be reckoned with economically but also more importantly, militarily. And so we had a little bit of adjustment to our programming schedule on this segment number 2 because we felt it was important to bring that live coverage. Terry, how are you doing today?
I'm blessed. Thank you so much for asking. And I was honored to come in right in as we were listening in on the president's speech. I think it's very important for us on the world stage to understand the powers that be are having conversations that relate to the economy, relate to to our small business, which is this platform is here to give the nuggets and the training and the tips and the tools. And so it's always important to make sure that globally that we are in touch. And so it was really appropriate to have that that segment play so that those that are listening to us throughout the world, they're able to know what's going on at this conference. But more importantly, they can walk away feeling that our president, the president of the United States, is having conversations about us, for us, to better us. I keep on thinking about Build Back Better, right? As it relates to our economy, as it relates to our health, because we're still coming out of this pandemic. And so it's always really important for us to stay tuned globally because we're not an island. We're all connected. And that was the importance of having this conference in the first place so that we are like-minded people are at the table making decisions. So,
I love the analogy. We're not an island. I say that because when if you live in the Caribbean, there are many islands in the archipelago of the Caribbean, right? And so we live on an island. So your analogy was quite appropriate when you say you may physically live on a landmass of an island, but we're not an island, and no man or woman is an island by themselves. And so therefore, but just to kind of help our audience, both viewing and listening audience, the 47th G7 summit was held on the 11th to the 13th of June of 2021 in Cornwall in the United Kingdom, while it holds the presidency of the different countries. And so to give you an idea, the United Kingdom hosted this year's summit. And then you have the participating countries. You had Australia, you had Canada, France, Germany, India, Italy, Japan, South Korea, South Africa, United Kingdom, United States, and the European Union. So those are the G7. Now, point of correction or point of clarity. When I talked about who is the meetings that the president Joe Biden is going to have, he met with Putin, but it had nothing to do with G7, right? I don't believe Russia is not part of the G7, right? No. And China certainly isn't. But on this trip on the world stage, while he's traveling overseas, he is meeting separately with these leaders, a leader of China and a leader of Russia, while he is traveling overseas to Europe as well as Asia as well in the Indo-Pacific region. And so the participants include the leaders of 7 G7 member states, as well as representative of the European Union. The president of the European Commission. European Commission has been a permanently welcome participant at all meetings and decision-making since 1981, while the current president of the European Council has been the EU's co-representative since the 36th G8 summit hosted by Canada in 2010. And so one of the things I'm going to do, and because obviously we're halfway through the show, I'm going to what I originally wanted to focus on segment number 2 on business, economy, and public policy. I wanted to take a look at 2 areas, 3 areas. Sorry. When we talk about wealth and we talk about the generation of wealth and how the wealth in this country is divvied up, how it,
How it's distributed, right?
how exactly how is it sectioned off. Wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that, and also talk about the role of the different segments and how impactful those segments are within that U.S. ecosystem, and talk about how do we address the inequities. It's one thing to talk about the inequality that exists in this country, and we can talk about this until the cow comes home. But if we don't have the first and foremost the understanding, and if we don't have a clue as to how we're going to fix this,
That's right.
we're going to have the same conversation 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and nothing's going to change.
Right.
Case in point. So when America talks about its policy, again, remember this segment 2, business, economy, public policy. When you talk about the United States and its foreign policy, you got to first look at what domestically are the policy of the United States as it relates to its relationship with the rest of the world, and how it treat its population that is very diverse, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multinational in terms of the diaspora, and that are part of the American fabric, right? Now we have the president overseas attending the G7 summit, but how does that translate into what is the policy, the foreign policy of the United States, and the agency that is responsible for administrating those policies, which is the State Department? And so what I'm going to do is, it's on this segment, I'm going to air a part of the hearing that took place in Washington and in Congress, my apologies, talking about exactly what is that policy, what is that plan by the State Department, because as they request their budget as to what they need to address America's foreign policy worldwide, what is that conversation? What are they asking for? What is it we're saying that we want to do? And this is important because it speaks to why the president is traveling overseas and having these engagement with these other countries and other leaders, because it speaks to our foreign policy and how that's being carried out and executed. And so I will play that because for the rest of this segment, I want to be able to share that with you as the viewing public. And then what I'll do is, I know I'm not going to have the benefit of my colleague Terry with me, because that will be segment number 3. But I will do an overview of exactly what is that economic impact or output by small businesses, minority-owned businesses, and women-owned businesses, as well as what does that represent collectively in terms of the buying power of that group, and then talk, because this is June and it's a National Caribbean Heritage Month. I'm going to rebroadcast, how exactly Caribbean American businesses, how did they manage the pandemic? How did they fare in terms of, being able to deal with all of the challenges and the hurdles with the pandemic? And so I will air that in segment number 3 after segment number 2. So for the time that we have left, let me just, I didn't have the benefit of my colleague last week. Terry, how have you been? And what's on your mind? Anything you'd like to share and talk a little bit about in terms of what you've heard and what you see happening in the world? This is a world in peril, right? And so we see a lot happening.
That's right. So just a couple of things. I'm looking forward to sharing, hearing a little bit more about the segment that you're getting ready to play, the piece. But more importantly, I just want our listeners to understand that this is an opportunity for you to gather information and then, ask us the questions so that we can help you get the resources that you need in your business, especially. But more importantly, if you're looking to grow, if you're looking for additional help or assistance, technical assistance, whatever it is, this is the marketplace. And this is where we are to help you to get those things. And so as you're listening to, we're global today, so we're worldwide, we're on the world stage today. And so as you're listening to some of what's going on in the world, just understand that there's a lot more resources available now as we come out of this pandemic than it was before. And so we've talked about a lot of it. We've offered the PPP here on this platform. The restaurant grant is available. There's other things that are available. And so I don't want you to lose sight of all the resources that are available. And I'm looking forward to coming back. I saw that you had the 10,000 Small Business Initiative PowerPoint up. And so I'm looking forward to coming back later on and kind of walking our businesses through what those services mean.
Great. So I'm going to have the benefit of your contribution. Segment number 3. Okay. That'd be great. That would be great because I wasn't sure. I didn't want to take for granted your schedule.
Right. I won't be able to stay for the whole time, but
that's okay. I'll take what I can get. So I'm grateful for what that is.
Okay.
You are correct. We are watching the theater of government, federal government, right? And really having the debate as to what is the plan,
mm-hmm.
what is the agenda going forward for this Congress and for this administration,
mm-hmm.
and how do we tackle the Herculean task of having to overcome a pandemic that we're still in the middle of a global health crisis. While some countries are doing better than others, right? We still see the challenge of new strands of the virus, right? Of the COVID-19 virus. And so we as a country, again, and this is why it's important for us to share this information with you.
Mm-hmm.
We've made a decision as a country, the administration, the Biden-Harris administration has made a decision that they're going to donate, that's right, folks, donate
mm-hmm.
a 500 million vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine,
mm-hmm.
to 100 countries around the world.
That's right.
Okay.
That's huge.
And you see, this is how we connect the dots, because we can't have conversation, in silos. While we understand the role of silos, we can't have conversation in vacuum because it's all connected, right?
That's right.
America cannot lead by example if it doesn't have a strong foreign policy and a plan to put its money where its mouth is.
Mm-hmm.
So America is going to donate 500 million, $500 million of the Pfizer vaccine to 100 countries around the world to help them combat the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
You see how important that is in terms of not only sharing and reporting on what the president is doing overseas with the G7, right?
Right.
But we report that, we bring that live, but to also hear what's happening in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
How is Congress addressing the foreign committee, the foreign affairs committee? How are they addressing the issues of how the United States is going to respond to the rest of the world,
mm-hmm.
because it's a world in peril, right? We have crisis on so many different fronts, right? Economic, healthcare, climate, military conflict. I mean, there's a lot of diffusion, if you will. Most important, but as you said, the monies. I mean, the dollars that they're throwing at having to deal with. How do we best mitigate
mm-hmm.
the health crisis, the economic crisis?
That's right.
A dilapidated, a broken infrastructure,
mm-hmm.
that has been neglected for decades,
That's
right? And this president, short of phenomenal, we know people are going to take position based on party affiliation, and they're going to critique a particular leader because of their party affiliation. But being an objective, critical thinker, giving Jack his jacket, that the president is fighting putting out fires on many fronts,
yes,
and fighting these huge battles in terms of making sure that we continue as a country to be the leaders that we are and to really preserve and sustain our position as leaders in the marketplace. Because if we're going to lead, we got to lead by example.
That's right. Exactly.
You know, and so what I want to do at this point, let me bring up, if you will, I'll take a break. We'll take a break, and when we come back, I will then play part of the hearing that took place in Congress recently, a couple weeks ago, with the State Department requesting their budget based on their policy position and how they're going to, what is their foreign policy position around the world. All right, Terry. So if any, I don't know if you want to add anything else. I will send you the link for this third segment, so you have that.
Okay.
And then we'll have the conversation. But when we come back from the break, we'll pull up that piece in Congress. All right. Anything you want to say before I let you go?
No, that's it. Thanks.
All right, fantastic. Folks, this is the Marketplace Show Reset and Jumpstart TV, segment number 2 on business, economy, and public policy. We will be right back after these messages.
Right now, 91 million Americans are financially overlooked. 48% have a fear of finance. 2 in 3 lack the ability to manage their finances. We solve this issue by combining financial literacy and financial management into one seamless app. 1. Have your financial goals align with your values. 2. Track your money and forecast how big decisions will impact your virtual accounts. 3. Build financial literacy at your own pace. Our competitors are rigid, disconnected, and impersonal. They represent the old way of doing finance. That's not who we are. We personalize your finances for you because we know one size does not fit all. We're democratizing personal finance. Join the tribe.
Small business is a part of all of us each and every day. It's where we eat, it's where we shop, it's where we go to meet our friends and colleagues. In the wake of COVID-19, our small business community desperately needs our help. We must do our part to help our local communities to once again thrive. We must focus our attention on the small businesses that are the fabric of our great nation. SureUp is a network of small business owners, their employees, and local consumers all working in unison to support each other. By creating incentives for consumers to think local before considering regional and national providers to fulfill their needs, we create local job opportunities and rebuild our communities. In addition, through AI-driven tools and machine learning, in just 5 minutes a day, SureUp assists business owners in improving their social media presence, which enhances their visibility among consumers and levels the playing field so that local businesses can better compete with large, name-brand online competitors. When local businesses leverage the SureUp platform, full-time and part-time employees, whether W-2 or 1099, are rewarded with a variety of voluntary perks and member benefit options. These include discounts on the things people do every day, access to low-cost, subscription-based telehealth and teletherapy, discounted prescription drug plans, connection to exclusive Prosper resources, and so much more. All for less than the cost of a cup of coffee each day. The Jumpstart Marketplace is here to support the health and wellness of individual employees, as well as the health of businesses in the local.
And finally, members not present at the time the hearing is called to order. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings or markups. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. So once again, let me just welcome our Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. Secretary Blinken, our country, we're truly fortunate to have your determined, effective, and respective leadership at the helm of the State Department, especially during this time of tremendous upheaval and discord. Thank you for your service to our country and for being here today. One of my priorities as chair is finding new ways to better engage the American public in global affairs, especially communities and people who have historically been felt at least disconnected and marginalized from foreign policy. This begins with making sure that Congress is able to play its full role in foreign policy decision-making. In our first conversation after your confirmation as Secretary of State, you expressed your desire to make the State Department more open and accountable to Congress. It's still early in your tenure, but I've really been very pleased to see clear evidence of your efforts and look forward to working with you more on this effort, which is critical to ensuring that we have a foreign policy that reflects the values and priorities of all Americans. The tools of diplomacy and foreign assistance have been undervalued and under-resourced for far too long. Today's hearing will provide members of our subcommittee a timely opportunity to hear directly from you how diplomacy and foreign assistance can effectively be utilized to respond to the growing challenges around the world. First and foremost, of course, is bringing the COVID-19 pandemic to a close, which includes the rapid distribution and administration of vaccines and helping the developing world recover from the pandemic's devastating impact across all sectors. I'm especially eager to hear the latest on the administration's efforts to make vaccines available in low and middle income countries. And of course, one of my priorities as chair is eliminating longstanding barriers to diversity that exist in our foreign affairs workforce and that perpetrate a system where minorities and women are chronically underrepresented. I know you share this goal. Your recent appointment of Ambassador Winstanley as Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer is a very positive step. Nevertheless, previous secretaries of state did not effectively tackle the deep-rooted institutional and structural barriers to diversity at the State Department. And so I'm anxious to hear how you will hold yourself and the rest of the building accountable to finally breaking through and putting in place long-standing and effective solutions. I'm also eager to discuss the administration's approach to traditionally under-prioritized regions of the world, including Sub-Saharan Africa and the Caribbean. Additionally, I am also concerned about the lack of action on Cuba policy, which in my view has not had the level of priority that I had expected. We need to turn the page from the previous administration's outdated and counterproductive policies and return to engagement and dialogue to resolve our differences and to press for change. What I see so far is just the opposite. And so I'm especially anxious to know the rationale for not reversing the last-minute listing of Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism by the Trump administration. And Mr. Secretary, the recent outbreak of conflict between Israelis and Palestinians was and is deeply concerning. And I want to just thank you for your work in achieving the ceasefire. The last 4 years have been extremely difficult ones for the Palestinian people. The previous administration's cruel and irresponsible policy resulted in closed diplomatic missions, the suspension of humanitarian and development aid, and unprecedented levels of mistrust and resentment toward American involvement in the Middle East amongst the Palestinian people, let alone further setting back. And I really believe that the setting back of the cause of our cause for a two-state solution really did occur in the last few years. And so I appreciate the president's commitment to restarting our assistance to the Palestinians, to advancing prosperity, security, and freedom for both Israelis and Palestinians in tangible ways. The fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021 enacted SFOP's bill included for humanitarian assistance and development programs in the West Bank and Gaza, which were passed without controversy or partisan debate. I'm pleased that your fiscal 2020 request proposes $218 million for such assistance, although I believe that we can and we should do more. Also, I'm pleased the administration is renewing diplomatic focus and resources to the Northern Triangle countries. The halt in our assistance during the previous administration not only set us back from addressing the root causes of migration, it cost critical time and credibility needed to make progress on human rights economic opportunity, combating corruption, and upholding the rule of law. Nevertheless, before committing to a 4-year and $4 billion plan, which includes 860 million requests this year, Congress needs to really understand how we will measure progress and ensure long-lasting impact, particularly on combating corruption and impunity in the region. The Biden administration budget also includes a commitment to restoring America's standing in the world through robust engagement with the United Nations and funding for the World Health Organization, UNFPA, and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, among other international organizations. I fully support efforts to reinvigorate our multilateral partnerships so that we are better positioned to tackle today's global challenges, from COVID-19 pandemic to climate change and the many secondary impacts of both. Before I conclude, let me just say I'm also very disappointed that over the last 4 years, the United States has not paid its full United Nations peacekeeping assessments, and that we have accrued over $1 billion in arrears. And so as chairwoman, I'm fully committed to partnering with the Biden-Harris administration on meeting our annual assessed payments, paying down our United Nations arrears, and putting in place a realistic solution that prevents this type of staggering dereliction of responsibility by the United States again. Mr. Secretary, it's clear we have much to discuss today, but I want to thank you again for your tireless work on behalf of the American people, your leadership and dedication to the most pressing foreign policy issues of our time. I hope this is the first of many discussions between you and the subcommittee, and I look forward to your testimony. And now I'd like to yield and turn the time over to our ranking member, Mr. Rogers, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, welcome to the subcommittee, albeit at a distance. We want to thank you for being able to be with us to answer questions about your budget request for fiscal 22. You know, each year when the Secretary of State comes up to testify before this subcommittee, I reflect upon the seemingly endless global challenges and am struck by the number of complex problems the Secretary of State must address on any given day or even hour. This year in particular stands out given the number of crises around the world testing our country's foreign policy. And I would say, Mr. Secretary, you have your work cut out for you. But we are here to try to help any way that we can. And we thank you for being willing to answer our questions. The request for fiscal 22 is $61.96 billion. That's an increase of more than 11%, almost 12, from the fiscal year 21 enacted level. While I oppose the sweeping cuts to the State Department put forward by the previous administration, I'm also concerned about the magnitude of the increases being proposed in this request. I intend to give it fair consideration, but budgets of this size will be difficult to justify given our country's unprecedented deficits and debt. In addition, increases in the president's budget for this bill and other non-defense programs appear to come at the expense of our military. I hope the committee will carefully consider the potential consequences from these kinds of trade-offs as allocations are decided. Mr. Secretary, although I believe this budget request has some seriously misguided priorities, which I will address in a moment, there are a number of things I applaud for in your proposal. I appreciate that the request fully funds the enacted level for Israel's foreign military financing at $3.3 billion. And I was pleased to learn the administration supports additional funding to replenish the Iron Dome and other depleted systems. They were essential to preventing massive casualties in Israel from Hamas' aggressive rocket attacks last month. I'm also pleased to see funding maintained without conditions for Egypt, another key partner in the Middle East. I may return to Egypt in my questions, but I was glad to hear they were given credit for their role in helping to end the recent conflict and of your productive meeting with President al-Sisi. Turning to embassy security, the funding is maintained at current levels, which is a notable improvement from the two previous administrations. You can count on my support in remaining ever vigilant in the defense of U.S. personnel and facilities overseas. I also support the increased funding you're seeking to counter Chinese malign influence. Unfortunately, the environmental policies and projects in the president's budget will significantly disadvantage the United States against China. Under the deeply flawed Paris Agreement, our economy will suffer while China can do whatever it likes. I'm also disappointed to see, Mr. Secretary, cuts proposed in the budget for Jordan and Colombia, two key strategic partners that need our support now more than ever. I also have serious concerns with the approach taken in this request for the United Nations and other international organizations that appear to have abandoned any efforts at reform and burden sharing while doubling down on the funding. The unprecedented actions against Israel at the UN Human Rights Council and the ascension of Syria and Belarus to the World Health Organization's executive board are just two recent examples of how deeply flawed and dangerous some of these international bodies can be. There are other concerns that I will try to address in my questions, but before I close, Ms. Secretary, I want you to know that I take my role in providing oversight of your department very seriously and have for the last 36 years. I value the work of the Inspector General, and I hope you will too, especially in addressing chronic management challenges at your agency that persist year after year. To that end, I was very pleased to learn that the position of Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources was finally filled. Hallelujah. It's been a long crusade, but I'm glad to see, Mr. Secretary, that you've seen the wisdom in that position. The department has sorely needed someone at the highest levels to focus on the daily business of managing both operations and assistance, freeing up the secretary to do the policy chores that demand most of his time. I spoke with Deputy Secretary McKeon shortly after he came on the job, and I look forward to staying in touch with him as we go along. Mr. Secretary, let me conclude by thanking the men and women of your department, foreign and civil, as well as the locally employed staff advancing American leadership abroad. I salute their dedication, want them to know their sacrifices are appreciated on both sides of the aisle. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being open with us. You pledged early on that you would communicate well with the subcommittee, and this is a really good start. So thank you for being here.
All right, so that was a portion of the hearing, and to be continued, because this segment number 2 has concluded, and so we need to now transition to segment number 3 to be able to do the original programming that we had for today's segment 2 on business and the economy and consumer, with a focus on the divergent demographics of how and what that economic, power or purchasing power and output by a particular demographics in this country, that be it the minority community, be it small business, be it women-owned business. So that concludes it for now. And what I will do is I will then transition over to segment number 2. Thank you so much for tuning in. My colleague, Terry Coxum, is going to join me on segment number 3, and look forward to continuing the conversation. I'm Anthony Weeks for the Marketplace Show Reset and Jumpstart TV, broadcasting on WSDX. We'll be back shortly.